Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the wild, weird, and wacky world of the Word. It's a little wild, weird, and wacky in here right now. See that? I got chickens all around me because the snow is coming down. Pretty good clip out there right now. We're going to get maybe half a foot of snow here. Not like my friends that are only an hour south of me that have got anywhere between 3 and, in some cases, 5 feet of snow. Yep. And that's why the Bills game got transferred from Orchard Park, New York, to Detroit, Michigan for this coming Sunday. There's just no way, even if it stopped snowing right now, they could never get that stadium cleaned out in time. All right. What do we have going here? We have the letter to the Colossians, and it's a wonderful letter, but there's some things about it that make us take a second look. The chapters that we have is chapter 1, verses 11 through 20. And when you get down to verse 15, there are those who think, what's going on here? This is awesome stuff. It's heavy, deep stuff. There are all these different images. And keep that in mind. These are images that the writer is using to bring forth the whole message of who is Jesus and just what does he do for us? What has he done for us? What is he doing for us? All those different nuances there. And so often when you're translating from an ancient language like the Greek here into English, and you're trying to be as literal as possible, you lose all of that flavor. But even in the English here, it's still there. Now listen to it. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers. All things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. You could go on forever going through all those different images and pulling them apart and saying, okay, what's going on here? Beautiful, heavy stuff. That's why so many do think that it was an early creed. The people were now beginning to come together, the early Christians from this town and that town, this country, that country, and say, hey, let's codify, if you will, who we believe is the Messiah, this Jesus of Nazareth, and what he's done for us. And what they're doing is they're pulling together some of the beginnings of the scriptures that are being written. Because at this time, when Colossians is written, which is late first century, okay, maybe the beginning of the second century, what we have going on is we're still putting together our New Testament scriptures. They're not even all put together yet. And some of them are just, some of the things that are in it are just being written. So what do you have happening here? Well, as I mentioned, it looks like it's an early Christian creed, but also this is stuff that Paul really hasn't spoken a whole lot about. So that brings up the whole issue of, did Paul borrow this and include it in his letter? Or is it the fact that Paul didn't write this letter, that this postdates Paul by even a couple generations? And that is what we really do think, because as you continue to read through the epistle, you find that there's a lot of things happening in the Colossian era and in that church that just aren't even mentioned in the other letters that Paul has written. So it very likely, even though it says Paul, an apostle, was written by one of his disciples or a second generation disciple after Paul. Remember, pseudepigrapha, false authorship, false writing, was very common back in that day, and you use someone's sacred name, in a sense, the Apostle Paul. Man, he walks on water, almost like Jesus. We know that he didn't, but you know what I mean. He was really highly esteemed in the Christian community. So when I write this letter to the Colossians, I'm going to mention Paul's name as if Paul is writing it. But it's more like You know what? If the Apostle Paul was alive today, he would be saying this to you, all right? So we have that going on too. And here's one reason why. We have this thing called the hapax legomena that shows up again. Hapax legomena? Yeah, that's right, Mr. Rooster. He's shouting it out there. Hapax legomena. I don't know if you can see him or not, but yeah, two of them are just going back and forth between the coops and the barn here. But that is a word that's only found once in the Bible. And it's even harder to find that word in other ancient writings as well. Every now and then it pops up, but not often. We have two of them here, and one of them is in verse 18, which says, so that he might come to have first place in everything. First place? That's not anywhere else in the Bible. Jesus is in first place? Yeah, he is. Or in verse 20, where it says, making peace through the blood of his cross. Making peace. That word is not used by Paul or anyone else in the New Testament for that reason. So it sounds like this is probably a different author. If not, it's a hymn or a creedal statement that's being inserted here. The whole phrase, to make peace through the blood of the cross, Paul never says that in his other writings. He talks about the blood of Jesus bringing us reconciliation and peace, not the blood of the cross. So that's interesting that you have that going on. But what does this really tell us? This beautiful, beautiful, thick, heavy, theological, Christological. See, Christology is what you believe about Jesus, what he does for us, what he's done for us, what he will do for us, and who he was. And that's part of your theology, which is your total look at who God is and what God does for us. But what we have here is Jesus as our Redeemer, our Creator, our Reconciler. Yep, all those three things together that really pack a punch for us. And because he has created all these things and he has died for us and forgives us, he holds it all together now, the great reconciler. Okay, you know, there's 9 verses in our passage today, and that word all is used 10 times. And in the creedal part itself, or the hymn, whatever you want to think it is, there are 8 usages of the word all. So that repetition makes it flow so beautifully, not only in the Greek, but also in our English translations. Well, God's blessings be with you. I'm having a hard time talking over all these roosters in here, and they're checking the snow depth. They go outside and they come back in, and they're just sharing. Oh, we got 2 inches over here. We got 2 1/4 inches here. We're beating you. Ha. Hey, guys are only 20 feet apart. God's blessings be with you, and have an awesome day.